PH Deck Building. I am your host, Demo, and I can't stop making commander decks. You might say I have a problem. It's the reason I started my channel. The reason I started this channel is because I was making so many commander decks in 2020, particularly after Commander Legends came out, that I was like, well, I'm not using most of these. I just like making decks, probably more than I even like playing decks. So why don't I make a channel I can throw those decks on there for other people to enjoy? That was the actual inception of my channel. I've made hundreds of decks on my channel for Commander, on top of the fact that I make decks for my patrons on my Patreon as well. But even on top of all of that, I am still making decks that aren't for really anybody. I guess some of them are kind of for myself, and I will make them with a little bit of interest or just an idea that I have, and it doesn't really go anywhere, or I don't really like the deck, so I don't really end up using it, and I don't really use it for my channel. But in this case, again, I'm getting back to my roots here because I got a whole bunch of decks that I have made in the last couple of months that might as well throw it on there for you guys to use so that they're not going to waste. Some of these are newer commanders, some of them are older commanders. I got 5 decks here for you guys to check out if you are interested in them. And I'm going to start out first of all with Katilda and Lier. Green, white, and a blue human. Whenever you cast a human spell, target instant or sorcery card in your graveyard gains flashback until end of turn. The flashback cost is equal to its mana cost. So interesting commander that just came out in March of the Machine. And you know, the human and the instant sorcery thing don't work super well together. I think this is going to be a middle of the road commander where there is a lot of nice value you can get off of this, of course. But because the human and the instant sorcery theme don't work great together, of course you're doing a creature theme with the humans, and then you're doing a spell slinger theme with the instant sorcery, and there's not a lot of crossover there. For that reason, it might keep people away from this one. Crib swap would be the only exception here, right? I talked about this in the spoiler video. Crib swap, of course, has changeling, even though it is a tribal instant. So when you cast it, it will trigger your commander because it technically is a human spell. And then of course it'll go to your graveyard and it's an instant. And then when you cast another human spell, you can cast it from your graveyard again. I also have a couple other changeling cards in here, Unsettled Mariner and Moray to the Frost, just great creatures that have changeling. So of course, when we cast them, they will be human spells and they will be triggering our commander. Finding great humans for this deck is not difficult. Bastion Protector, of course, is going to give our commander indestructible, which is great. Bounty Agent is a human, but also a removal option. Malevolent Hermit is a human, but also a counter spell. Devout Chaplain is also removal, but doing the human theme as well, right? We do have some human tribal stuff here, so you can tap it and tap 2 untap humans you control, including your commander, to exile target artifact or enchantment. Cathar Commando, same thing. It's a human, and you can sacrifice it to destroy an artifact or enchantment, but more importantly, it has flash, and that's one of the things I realized when I was playtesting this deck is I really want to be able to cast those instants in my graveyard at instant speed, of course. That's the biggest advantage to having instants. So if I can flash out a human, then I can trigger my commander on someone else's turn to cast an instant from my graveyard, right? If I got a counter spell in my graveyard and I want to counter my opponent's thing, I can flash out my Cathar Commando, give that counter spell flashback, and then I can use the counter spell, of course, what I wanted to use it for. So I also have Containment Priest and Deputy of Quittles in here. Not a whole lot of humans with flash, but these are a couple that I threw in here, and this is the reason why I'm doing it, right? I want to be able to trigger my commander's ability on other people's turns as well. Keho Manamo Historian. Fantastic fit here because, of course, it is a human. It will be triggering our commander, but also when it enters the battlefield, we're going to search our library for 3 instant cards, exile them and shuffle our library, and then we can pay X and tap to cast a card with converted mana cost X exiled with Keho. So again, we're doing the human thing, but also we're doing the instant thing. It does fit both themes. Wrath, Weatherlight Stalwart also kind of fits both themes because it is a human, but also is doing the instant sorcery thing, because whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, you may tap 2 untapped creatures you control to draw a card. And of course, we are going to have a lot of creatures lying around. There's 35 creatures in this deck, right? This is technically a creature deck. I also have Peer Pressure in the deck. I thought this was a really interesting include. 3 and a blue sorcery. Choose a creature type. If you control more creatures of the type than each other player, you gain control of all creatures of that type. I think this is probably a great include in any human tribal deck if you're in blue, because human is probably the most common creature type in the entire game of Magic, and it is entirely likely that at any given point during the game, your opponents are going to have some humans in play. And of course, because you're playing human tribal, you're going to have the most. So you're going to cast this, you're going to choose human, and if you control more humans than anyone else, which you likely will, you're going to gain control of all the other humans. So I think that's a really interesting include in the deck as well. Really interesting commander, I think. I also really like Bant colors. Just didn't love the deck. I'm not going to build it myself. It's in the description below though if you guys want to go after it. Next up, another newer commander, Neyam Shai Murad from Warhammer 40k, 2 white and a black human rogue 3/3. When Neyam Shai Murad deals combat damage to a player, you may have that player return target permanent card from their graveyard to their hand. If you do, that player chooses a permanent card in your graveyard, then you put it onto the battlefield under your control. This was one of my favorite commanders from that set. I just thought it was really interesting and unique, and sort of has that political aspect to it as well. And you certainly could do that when you attack with your commander. You could even make a deal with one of your opponents to let you get in for damage because you're going to return something from their graveyard that they actually want, right? And then of course, they'll return something that you want. You can do a lot of that stuff. That just makes for a really interesting commander gameplay, I think. Not a lot of people went after this one. It is one of the least popular ones from the set. I put a pretty interesting deck together here, I think. Of course, we want to be getting in for damage, so Vexilus Praetor from the same set and Whisper Silk Cloak. The deck is built around the commander, so it's important for us to protect our commander, and it is also really important for us to get in for damage. Both of these cards will be doing that in spades, so great inclusions in the deck. We also want to be putting stuff in our graveyard, right? Because we're returning stuff from our graveyard into play, so we want to be cheating stuff into play. So we put it into our graveyard so that we can then cheat it into play. I got Body Launderer in here, which is a great option for putting stuff in our graveyard. Of course, it's a conniving whenever a non-token creature we control dies, so that gives us the ability to discard stuff into our graveyard, and also has that recursion option when it dies, and maybe we can cheat one of those giant creatures that we discarded into play. I really like Necrologia here. This is just a great draw spell, but really underrated in the discard or graveyard theme because it's a great way to throw stuff into your graveyard. 3 black instant, but you can only cast a spell during your end step. As an additional cost to cast this spell, you pay X life and you draw X cards. So if we pay 7 life, we're going to draw 7 cards on our end step, which of course means we're probably going to end up having to discard down to hand size, but we're okay with that. That's a great way for us to put stuff that we want into our graveyard. Of course, we just want to be chucking those big permanents into our graveyard that we can be getting back, so I threw a bunch of them in here. Ashen Rider, Debtor's Knell, of course. It's not hard to find big, expensive permanents that we can cheat into play later in the game. Void Beckoner and Scion of Darkness are particularly great because they're big, scary creatures, but also have cycling abilities, so we can cycle them into our graveyard. An easier way to get them there. Spirit Sister's Call, one of my favorite cards from Neon Dynasty, is a fantastic fit here, and again gives us the ability to cheat creatures into play. We can cycle that Scion of Darkness into our graveyard, and then of course on our end step sacrifice some little creature to get it back into play. Controlling what's in our graveyard is going to be important too, right? We don't want a bunch of lame stuff in our graveyard that our opponents can choose, right? Because they get to choose the permanent that we are returning. So being able to exile lame permanents from our graveyard that we don't want back is important. Organ Grinder I threw in here. 2 and a black, zombie 3/1. Tap, exile 3 cards from your graveyard. Target player loses 3 life. So of course, having one of your opponents lose 3 life is great, but this just gives us the ability to get rid of some of those permanent cards out of our graveyard that we don't want back. Egon, God of Death, will do this as well. At the beginning of your upkeep, exile 2 cards from your graveyard if you can't sacrifice Egon and draw cards. So this is a great way to exile cards out of our graveyard that we don't want in there. We can also pay the Throne of Death side if we want to be milling ourselves as well. It also will allow us to exile a creature card from our graveyard to draw cards, so it does something very similar. Murderous Cut I have in the deck because Delve is another really great way to exile cards from our graveyard that we don't want in there. Decaying Soil is a really interesting way to do this. 1 black enchantment. At the beginning of your upkeep, exile a card from your graveyard. So this is a way that we can exile a card from our graveyard that we don't want in there. Also has Threshold. As long as 7 or more cards are in your graveyard, Decaying Decaying Soil has whenever a non-token creature is put into your graveyard from the battlefield. You may pay 1. If you do, return that card to your hand. Not too shabby. And I also have Sinkhole in the deck. And this is another thing that I try to do this deck a little bit. You know, our opponents are going to have permanents in their graveyard that we have to pick. And I thought, well, what's the least threatening thing that they can have in their graveyard that we can give them back? And of course, it's probably going to be a land. So Sinkhole will allow us to destroy a land our opponent controls so that when we deal damage to them, we can choose that land that we just destroyed and we'll give them that back. Not that big of a deal, right? I think this is a really interesting commander. Hopefully some of you guys will be interested in this deck I made. The deck list again is in the description. Let's move on though to Isareth the Awakener. 1 black human wizard 3/3 with death touch. Whenever Isareth the Awakener attacks, you may pay X. When you do, return target creature card with mana value X from your graveyard to the battlefield with a corpse counter on it. If that creature would leave the battlefield, exile it instead of putting it anywhere else. So this is a commander that got a little bit of shade when it first came out because people didn't like the design. First of all, putting the corpse counter on your creature really didn't do anything because removing the corpse counter didn't really do anything because of course the creature would still get exiled. Also, people didn't like the fact that you had to attack with your commander. You had to pay the X where it's the mana value. So there's not really any cheating a cost there. The creature gets exiled instead of going anywhere else, right? There's a whole lot of bad things about this commander. However, I tried to turn the bad things into good things, right? Whenever you're building an underwhelming commander, which of course I think this is, try to turn those downsides into upsides. So first of all, we want to be returning creatures from our graveyard to the battlefield, and some of them are just great, right? It doesn't matter if they get exiled. Like a Lifecrafter, for example, we can play that, sacrifice it to its own ability, it goes to the graveyard. Then when our commander attacks, we can return it to play by paying 3, and everyone's got to sacrifice again. We don't really care that it gets exiled. Another really great creature that we don't care if it gets exiled is Blood Tracker. We can pay a black and pay 2 life to put a +1/+1 counter on it. And when it leaves the battlefield, we draw a card for each +1/+1 counter on it. So of course, this card doesn't care if it gets exiled. The first time we play it, we can put some counters on it, sacrifice it. And of course, we have a lot of sack outlets in this deck. We're going to draw a card for each counter on it. And then when we get it back with our commander later, we can put some more counters on it. And if it gets exiled, so what? It's still leaving the battlefield. We will still get to draw those cards. We can still do a little bit of the cheating of mana cost things here with Archfiend's Vessel. This is a 1 black mana human cleric 1/1 with lifelink. When Archfiend's Vessel enters the battlefield, if it entered from your graveyard or you cast it from your graveyard, exile it. If you do, create a 5/5 black demon creature token with flying. So this is a way with our commander to pay 1 black mana and create a 5/5 black demon. So that's a great fit in the deck. Demon of Catastrophes also will sort of cheat mana costs here a little bit. 2 black demon 6/6, flying and trample. So a flying trample 6/6 for 4 mana is fantastic. As an additional cost to cast it, we have to sacrifice a creature though. Well, we're kind of in a sacrifice theme here, so we're okay with that. And when we get it back out of our graveyard at a later time, we don't have to pay that casting cost, of course, because we're not casting it. We just have to pay the 4 and we can put a flying 6/6 trampler directly into play. Pretty good. Also, the rules situation here with our commander's ability, it says if that creature would leave the battlefield, exile it instead of putting it anywhere else. Well, if you're already exiling it, then it's not going to do anything, right? That's why cards like Conjurer's Closet and Prowling Geistcatcher will work here. Conjurer's Closet will allow us to blink a creature that we have already returned from the graveyard, and because it's already getting exiled, it will just come back and do play normally because of our Conjurer's Closet ability, and then the ability on our commander will no longer exist on it. So essentially, what Conjurer's Closet does is permanently put that creature back into play. Prowling Geistcatcher will work in a little bit of a different way where if we sacrifice that creature, and again, a lot of sack outlets in this deck, we will exile it. And of course, that overwrites our commander's ability because it's getting exiled anyway. If that creature was a token, put a +1/+1 counter on Prowling Geistcatcher. And when Prowling Geistcatcher leaves the battlefield, and again, we have a leaves the battlefield trigger here, which means if we get this back out of the graveyard with our commander's ability, it won't matter. We will still get the trigger, and we're going to get to return each card exiled with it to the battlefield under your control. control. So all those creatures that we have sacrificed, then exiled with our combination Commander's ability, Prowling Geistcatcher ability, we will actually get back into play. Some really neat fits in here are the ones that are taking advantage of the fact that we are putting those seemingly useless corpse counters on our creatures when we get them back. Nakara Layer Scavenger. Whenever another creature you control leaves the battlefield, again, this is a leaves the battlefield trigger, so works with our commander. If it had one or more counters on it, you draw a card and you lose one life. Doesn't matter what kind of counter, any kind of counter works here. So any of those creatures we are getting back out of our graveyard will have corpse counters on them, and when they leave the battlefield, we'll get to draw a card. Feign the Broker works really, really nicely here. Has that ability, remove a counter from a creature you control to create a treasure token. So now those seemingly useless corpse counters on our creatures, we can just remove them here to create a treasure token. Power Conduit will do something similar. It can remove those corpse counters from our creatures to put a +1/+1 counter on a creature we control. And that's probably my favorite thing about this deck, is I'm actually making use of those seemingly useless corpse counters, which aren't really doing anything. I guess they're just for flavor, but we can actually take advantage of them. I think this is a pretty interesting deck. Again, the deck list is in the description if you are interested. Moving on though to my Inquisitor Eisenhorn deck, and this one is a very interesting one that I recently just made, again from Warhammer 40k, 2 blue and a black Human Inquisitor 2/3. You may reveal the first card you draw each turn as you draw it. Whenever you reveal an instant or sorcery card this way, create Cherubel, a legendary 4/4 black demon creature token with flying, and whenever Inquisitor Eisenhorn deals combat damage to a player, investigate that many times. I thought this was a pretty interesting commander. Again, it's doing a couple of different things. The clue tokens that you are making sort of play into the first ability a little bit, of course, because you can crack that clue token on an opponent's turn, and that will be the first card you draw on that turn, and then you may be able to make the token with it. Of course, the token issue here is that it is legendary, so you can only create one at a time. Unless, of course, you have one of those effects that nicks the legend rule for yourself, and I thought that was a really interesting way to make this deck. So that's the deck that I made here. I have Mirror Box and Mirror Gallery in the deck. The idea of this deck is I want to make more of those 4/4 tokens. I'm not just going to make one, I'm going to make a whole team of flying black demons. That's the win con in the deck, essentially. And with Mirror Box and Mirror Gallery, you can do so, right? The legend rule doesn't apply. And that's the theme I built around. I built around the theme of I want to be making copies of legendary creatures, right? On top of the one I'm making with my commander with that demon token, I can do it with other stuff as well. Of course, I also have Sakashima of 1,000 Faces in here, which will make the legend rule not apply to permanents we control, but also enters the battlefield as a copy of another creature we control, which we can use on our commander, right? This is another thing we can do here. We can have Sakashima of 1,000 Faces come into play as a copy of our commander. Of course, the legend rule doesn't apply, so we get to keep both of them, and we will also get double triggers from our commander's first ability. So if we reveal a instant or sorcery off the top of our library, both of them will trigger, and we'll get 2 4/4 demons, which of course we get to keep them both because we don't have the legend rule. Sensei's Divining Top is probably the best card in any Inquisitor Eisenhorn deck, regardless of the strategy you're using, because of course we can manipulate the top card of our library, but also we can tap it to draw a card and put this on top of our library. So it gets us that first card draw of a turn on someone else's turn if we want to, right? On our opponent's turn, we can use this to shuffle the top cards of our library, put an instant or sorcery on top, and then flip our top. And now the first card we've drawn on our opponent's turn is going to be an instant or sorcery. So we get to create a demon on their turn as well. Another interesting decision I decided to go with in this deck is to do the snow theme. And the reason I went with the snow theme is because, first of all, I had a lot of space with what I was doing. You know, the Mirror Box, Mirror Gallery thing was not taking up a ton of space in the deck. So I decided, why not throw another theme in here as well? And I also decided to do it because of cards like Scrying Sheets, which worked really good in this deck. We're in the top deck manipulation theme here. And so that's another road I went down with in this deck, because we are going to be looking at the top card of our library a lot, shuffling the top card of our library, that kind of stuff. Scrying Sheets, of course, is a snow land, taps to add a colorless, but we can pay 1 and a snow mana and tap, look at the top card of our library. If it's snow, we may reveal it and put it into our hand. So it really works well with the theme of what we're already doing. And And there are other cards. Frost Augur, for example, does something pretty much exactly the same. Pay a snowman and tap, look at the top card of your library. If it's a snow card, you may reveal it and put it into your hand. Merit Lage's Slumber is also a snow card that fits nicely with the theme of what we're doing. When Merit Lage's Slumber or another snow permanent enters the battlefield under your control, scry 1. And of course, scrying works nicely with the top deck manipulation theme. Also, at the beginning of your upkeep, if you control 10 or more snow permanents, sacrifice Merit Lage's Slumber. If you do, create Merit Lage, a legendary 2020 black avatar creature token with flying and indestructible. That certainly is a possibility in this deck. And keep in mind, we do have copy effects like Sakashima, where if we make that 2020 token, we can create a copy of it as well. So that's an interesting thing we can do here. Pilfering Hawk, another snow permanent that works nicely in this theme because we can pay a snow mana and tap it to draw a card, then discard a card. And of course, again, we want to be getting those draw triggers on our opponent's turns as well. And this is a great way to do that. I am playing cards in this deck that I normally never touch, like Brainstorm and Opt, because they work really nicely with this theme. Brainstorm, of course, is that draw effect that we can do on our opponent's turn, but also stacks the top of our deck, which we also want to be doing. And Opt, again, gives us that draw effect on our opponent's turn and also is the scry that we also want in this deck. So these cards actually do work in this theme. I got Precognition Field and Mystic Forge. Both are going to work with the top deck manipulation theme. We can either be looking at the top card of our library, which we do want to be doing a lot, and we can also exile the top card of our library if it's not something we want there. Mystic Forge will allow us to cast artifacts from the top of our library, which we do have a lot in this deck. This is a heavy artifact deck. And Precognition Field will allow us to cast instants and sorceries from the top of our library, which of course we have a lot of those as well. Really, really interesting deck here. I think this is a super unique, interesting deck idea to go with Inquisitor Eisenhorn. I don't know if anyone else went with this theme because that is a very powerful ability of I just reveal the first card I draw every turn and I get to make a 4/4 demon. That's great. But of course, the fact that it's legendary doesn't allow you to make a whole bunch of them. And that's the theme I'm building around here is I want to make a whole team of those cherubles to swing at my opponents with. Really interesting deck. And finally today, I made a Oviya Pashiri Sage Lifecrafter deck. And again, this is another one that I was sort of toying with the idea of doing myself. 1 green mana, Human Artificer 1/2. Pay 2 and a green, tap, create a 1/1 colorless servo artifact creature token. Or you can pay 4 and a green and tap, create an XX colorless construct artifact creature token where X is the number of creatures you control. So we have a commander that is mono green that is creating artifact tokens, right? Not a lot of support in the artifact theme, typically for mono green. Really underwhelming commander. I actually have talked about it on my underwhelming commander series before, but I didn't actually end up making a deck with it. It was like the number 3 or number 2 commander. So I threw out some ideas, but this is one of those commanders that has gotten a lot better in recent times because of the cards that we've got, particularly last year. There's a whole bunch of cards that we got last year that I think have made this commander a lot better. And in particular, there is a card that I've been trying to make work. I've talked about it quite a bit on my channel because it's a card that I wished was better, but is really difficult to use and I think works perfectly here, which is Evolving Door. 2 and a green artifact, pay 1, tap, sacrifice a creature, count the colors of the sacrificed creature, then search your library for a creature card. That's exactly that many colors plus 1. Exile the card, then shuffle. You may cast the exiled card activate only as a sorcery. And most people would say, hey, well, this is ludicrous to put this in a monocolored deck because you have to look for a creature that is that many colors plus 1. But of course, our commander is making colorless creatures. That's why it is such a neat fit in this deck. We can tap our commander to make a 1/1 colorless servo artifact creature token. So of course, that's not any colors at all. So when we sacrifice that token to our Evolving Door, we are now going to look for a creature that is that many colors plus 1. So it's going to be 1 color. And of course, all the creatures in our deck pretty much are 1 color, right? All the green ones, which we have a whole bunch of those. So this allows us to sacrifice those servo tokens that we are making to go get any green creature out of our deck, and a couple of really great green creatures that we got last year that actually fit the artifact theme are Isareth Steelseeker and Teething Wormlet. You know, green is not famous for being great in the artifact theme, so if you're ever putting a mono green deck together and you want some support in the artifact theme, these are a couple of ones that we got last year that actually do fit. Isareth Steelseeker, 1 and a green, Human Artificer Scout, 1/2. Whenever an artifact enters the battlefield under your control, look at the top card of your library. If it's a land card, you may reveal it and put it into your hand. If you don't put that card into your hand, you may put it into your graveyard. So this is taking advantage of all those artifact tokens we are making. Teething Wormlet, 1 green mana worm, 1/1. Teething Wormlet has Death Touch as long as you control 3 or more artifacts. Whenever an artifact enters the battlefield under your control, you gain 1 life. If this is the first time this ability has resolved this turn, you can put a +1/+1 counter on Teething Wormlet. So just really neat green creatures that happen to fit the artifact theme that are going to work great here. We also got a lot of great support in the mono green token theme in Halsin Emerald Arch Druid and Jahiri Friend of the Forest, both background commanders that fit really nicely in the just token theme in general in green. Of course, Jahiri is going to let us tap any of our tokens to add green mana, and Halsin can turn those less menacing 1/1 servo tokens into 4/4 bears, which is going to be a nice way to help close out the game. Killer Service is another card that we got last year from New Capenna that will do a similar thing. 2 and a green enchantment. When Killer Service enters the battlefield, create a number of food tokens equal to the number of opponents you have. At the beginning of your end step, you may pay 2 and sacrifice a token. If you do, create a 4/4 green Rhino Warrior creature token. So we can sacrifice, of course, those food tokens that we make with our Killer Service, but we can also sacrifice those not so threatening 1/1 servo tokens to make 4/4 green rhinos instead. Really neat include in this deck that I just talked about in my 5 cards video, Animation Module, which at first glance doesn't seem to fit, but can be a really great include here. So 1 mana artifact, whenever 1 or more +1/+1 counters are placed on a permanent you control, you may pay 1. If you do, create a 1/1 colorless servo artifact creature token. So we're not doing the +1/+1 counter theme here. So that doesn't seem to fit, although it is making servo tokens. That part does fit. So what we have to do to make this card good in this deck is make the first part work with the second part, right? We have to make those +1/+1 counters fit so that we can make those servo tokens, and Cloakwood Swarmkeeper is a perfect way to do this. Again, another card that just came out last year. 1 green mana Elf Ranger, 1/1. Whenever 1 or more tokens enter the battlefield under your control, put a +1/+1 counter on Cloakwood Swarmkeeper. So when we make a servo token with our commander, that's a token entering the battlefield. We're going to put a counter on our Cloakwood Swarmkeeper, which will then trigger our animation module, and then we can pay 1, make another servo token with our animation module, which will then trigger our Cloakwood Swarmkeeper again. Pretty neat little combo in this deck, right? For every 1 mana that we have available, we can make a servo token and then put a counter on our Cloakwood Swarmkeeper. I suppose you could maybe throw a Phyrexian Altar in this deck as well. I didn't do this, but if you did, you can then sacrifice those servo tokens to pay for the animation module, which will then continue the combo infinitely. I didn't do that in this deck. You could as well if you want to. Tribute to the World Tree, another brand new card from Phyrexia, all will be 1 that will work very similarly. 3 green mana enchantment. Whenever a creature enters the battlefield under your control, draw a card if its power is 3 or greater, and we do have a fair amount of creatures with power 3 or greater that we can get card draw off of this with. Otherwise though, you put 2 +1/+1 counters on it. So when our commander enters the battlefield, it's going to get 2 +1/+1 counters on it. It's now 3/4. That's pretty decent for a 1 mana creature, but of course again works with our animation module. So we make a servo token. It's a 1/1 creature, so of course it's going to get those 2 +1/+1 counters on it. I mean, that in itself works fantastically with our commander, but then it's going to trigger our animation module. We pay 1, make another servo token, which again will get counters on it, and we can again repeat the process. Metallic Mimic will also work this way. Again, this works with our commander, right? We don't necessarily need the animation module to make this work. We just name servo with our Metallic Mimic, and of course, each other creature you control of the chosen type enters the battlefield with an additional +1/+1 counter on it. So whenever we're making servos with our commander, they're going to get a +1/+1 counter on them. That's not bad, right? Now they're going to be 2/2s. But if we have our animation module in play, now we make make a servo token with our commander, a servo enters the battlefield and gets a +1/+1 counter on it, which triggers our animation module, and we can pay 1 and repeat the process again. These are some pretty neat combos with animation module that I put in this deck that you probably normally wouldn't think of, right? But it works really nicely here. Another card that works really nicely with this whole sort of scenario is Retrofitter Foundry. Now we can pay 2 and tap it to create a 1/1 color servo artifact creature token, but more importantly, we can pay 1 and tap it to sacrifice a servo, right? We're going to be making lots of servos in this deck, and now we can sacrifice them to create a 1/1 colorless Thopter artifact creature token with flying. So now we get a creature with flying instead of just a little 1/1 ground thumper, and also we can tap it and sacrifice a Thopter to create a 4/4 colorless construct artifact creature token. So again, we're just trading up here with our Retrofitter Foundry. And I also threw Rampage of the Clans in here. This is an interesting fit in the deck. 3 and a green instant, destroy all artifacts and enchantments. For each permanent destroyed this way, its controller creates a 3/3 green centaur creature token. So of course it's going to destroy all our opponent's artifacts and enchantments, but it's going to destroy all our artifacts. So that doesn't seem like a great fit, right? In a heavy artifact theme. But again, this can be a neat way to close out the game where we have a whole bunch of little servo tokens in play. We're essentially transforming those servo tokens into 3/3 centaurs, which is a little more menacing. And of course, we can do it at instant speed. So on our turn, we can untap, and all of our little token artifact creatures are now 3/3 creatures. A better way to close out the game. Your commander only costs 1, but because your commander has that sort of mana intensive ability, it does take a little while to get going. But if you're in that play group that is a slower casual play group, this has a lot of neat little things, some really cool interactions that you can get into as the game goes on. So again, if you're interested in this deck list, it is in the description below. Feel free to check it out for yourself. That is it for today though, and thanks for tuning in.